So my name's Chad Mullinix. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I was down in Florida for a while with a church plant. So coming back here to Pennsylvania to serve at Westminster, it felt very much just like kind of coming home, which is nice. Married, have 5 children. My wife and I, when we met, we were still in college at the time, and it was at that point that we were introduced to Reformed theology. Neither one of us grew up in the Reformed faith, so it was at that point we started worshiping in a PCA congregation. First year of our marriage, they extended it was kind of a pre-seminary internship there, and one of the things that they had me do for that was to take or to listen to all of the lectures and do all of the coursework for Introduction to Systematic Theology that Dr. Gaffin was teaching. And that was what whetted my appetite for seminary at Westminster. I heard the content that was being given, and I thought, I've got to go to that place. I want to go and I want to learn there. So that was actually a really formative class for me that I guess I took twice because I did all the work for it in the internship, and then I took it for credit when I got to Westminster. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me from that class was an appreciation for the trustworthiness of the scriptures and the analogy of faith, trusting our Bible to be able to interpret itself. And that has been a tremendous benefit in gospel ministry, to know that this is a book that is unlike every other book. This is a book that is God-breathed, and it's one that is its own best interpreter. It's self-attesting. So that's immense for ministry because it's the foundation for everything that we do. Is coming back again and again to the Word. As a passage in Hebrews 13 talks about the joys and the groanings of ministry, and they're both. The ministry, I think, on this side of glory, it always has both of those components, but there are tons of joys, and I think we need to be careful not to let the challenges to eclipse the joys. But the joys, are seeing people come to know Jesus as their Savior, seeing people, maybe those who have been strangers to the covenant, and they're for the first time in their life coming to understand the doctrines of grace, and that I can be relieved from my guilt, my misery, and sin. That's probably one of the most profound joys is seeing people come to know Jesus as their Savior. It's a wonderful thing as you see children of the covenant grow up, and they're being taught these things in their homes. They're learning it in Sunday school classes and in church, but when they come to that sort of light bulb moment, and it's that clear recognition that this is Jesus for me, and not just sort of Jesus in abstract. That's a wonderful joy to see children of the covenant growing in their understanding of who Jesus is, and then coming to that point where they say, I want to profess my faith before the church. So that's a profound joy. Then there's, I guess, just the ongoing progress of sanctification that you see. Sometimes you see it as a congregation. Sometimes you see it more on an individual level. So, with some individuals, maybe it's them wrapping their minds around the implication of the Lord's Day and the pleasures of it and the joy of worship, and seeing priorities begin to shift and change, and them wanting to be there. For others, it might be seeing the bondage that they've been in to some sort of addiction, to see that broken, and to see them making progress, failures along the way, but just this steady progress. That's a great joy. Just a weekly joy, I guess, that comes to my mind is just the Lord's Day worship. It's the highlight of our weeks, and God's given us this day every week to bask in His presence and to worship Him, and to look out and see God's people, just singing their heart out to the Lord on the Lord's Day. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, there are times where people come and it's been a hard week, but they receive the comfort that they need in the gospel. That's great joy. Yeah. Yeah, I could go on and on about the joys, I guess. There's so many joys. And they do, I think, in the whole of ministry, even though ministry is characterized by suffering on this side as we're looking to glory, there is a steady, solid note of joy in gospel ministry. And the biggest challenge, of course, is always sin. We're all contributing to that in our own ways, whether in leadership or not. And so the challenge in ministry is trying to come back to the gospel over and over and just see how we need Jesus, we need his forgiveness. That's a challenge. I guess more specifically to that challenge, some of the things that I guess have brought the deepest grief in ministry are when you see somebody walk away from the faith. That it breaks your heart, and you want to see them return. And it's shown me the value of loving church discipline, which is sort of a taboo or bad word anymore. But I've seen the use of it, and I've seen the Lord use that to restore multiple people. And I guess that's kind of getting into a blessing of ministry, but. That's a big challenge. It's just dealing with sin, but it's why God's called us to ministry, because we need the gospel. I think another aspect of that is just when you reflect about your own weaknesses, and you want to be a more effective gospel minister. You want to be able to bring the word to the people in ways that are meaningful, and you feel weak many times. They don't need their pastor to be a super Christian. They need their pastor to be a fellow Christian. I've also learned how, particularly in this context, how grateful people can be just to hear the gospel. You work throughout the week, you do your exegesis, you do your studying, and you hope that you have something profitable to share with the people. And then to see people receive the word with eagerness and with joy, it just has reminded me of how we all need the gospel. Not just at the beginning of our Christian walk, but throughout the course of our journey, we continue to need it again and again and again. Pray that by God's grace, I might be faithful as a Christian, as a father, husband, as a minister of the gospel. That God would help me week in, week out to be ready in season, out of season, to preach and teach and exhort. Satan loves to tear down ministers, I think, because in some ways we are more of a public face of Christ. And so just that the Lord would keep me. Keep me from sin, keep me from temptation, keep me in his word. And I guess that relates a little bit to with my family as well. I want to be a faithful husband. I want to be a faithful father. There's nothing I would love more than to see my children all come to a saving knowledge of Jesus and walk with him all the days of their life. That's my heart's cry. And so you can pray for my wife, Katie, my 5 children. That would be wonderful. And then for the church, I think a critical thing for the church, not just here locally at Westminster, but any church, is that we would have a hunger and an appetite for the Word, we wouldn't grow complacent in our faith, but that there would be just an insatiable desire to feast on the Word. When there's that, I think so many other things just fall into place. If we can just continue to come back to the Word and let that be our infallible rule for faith and for practice, that would be a great thing to pray, I think, for the church locally, church globally.